Welcome to the Quick Sub F1 podcast. My name is Nyasha and you could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us. We appreciate that. Joining me today, I've got someone who will help me to understand and to articulate just what is going on at Ferrari. This is an emergency podcast to understand just how deep the issues at Ferrari go. And to help me do that is someone who's been on the show before, a friend of the show, much appreciated, is none other than motorsport journalist Ed Spencer. Here's some cheering for you. How's it going, Ed? You all right?
Not too bad, thank you. How is it? I hope everyone's well.
Oh no, we're all good, and thank you for coming on. So look, how do I put this? Right. So as someone who's a Lewis Hamilton fan, I've obviously, and I've watched F1. I think we're quite similar in age. We've like watching F1 since the 90s, right? So I always say, kind of like with Ferrari, in my lifetime, there's like three kind of stages of Ferrari, which was like pre-Schumacher, Schumacher, and then post-Schumacher. And even during Schumacher's time, there was chaos and crisis, but especially before Schumacher and after Schumacher, there's been crisis periods. I don't think I've seen that in this current iteration, probably since like the Alonso days, and then maybe towards the end of the Vettel days. I guess every time they get like a star driver and it starts to go to shit, it starts to kind of crumble down. But I guess with Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton, I don't think I've seen it at this point. I read an article of yours, which was quite good on auto evolution, kind of breaking down everything that's happening. So I guess before we get into everything, there's a quote from this article, which I found was, this is what drew me in. The prancing horse has never looked sadder, and after Sunday's Singapore Grand Prix, the atmosphere at Maranello is bordering on nuclear. Given all of the things that are going on in the paddock, like the whispers and the rumours, I guess, before we get into anything else, as like an overview, what is it that kind of makes you feel as if this crisis is a crisis of sorts?
I think this has to be the worst I've seen Ferrari in a long, long time. I mean,
You think, well, right? Yeah, like, because I didn't know if I wanted to say that, but it feels like the worst for a long time.
Yeah, I think we've both grown up in an era where Ferrari have been successful, and we've grown up in an era where Ferrari have been bad. I mean, even during like the 2020-21 period, which was a bit of an nadir, you could feel like, okay, they've got some building blocks in place where they can build it back up. This time, it feels a lot worse because coming into this season, there was so much hype with Ferrari. They'd come off that really good run, ended 2024. Charles Leclerc was in really good form, and on top of that you had Lewis Hamilton coming in. You know, the amount of people who tuned in on a cold January to see him test an old car at Ferrari. You had the feeling that this could be it, and yet now we're looking at a state where it's a point where Ferrari look at in such a bad state. It's unbelievable. You know, you've got one driver who looks depressed and is questioning his own talents and his own ability.
Yeah.
And you've got another one who's looking at the exit door. And on top of this, you've got little bits of infighting, which, let's be honest, I mean, those are the kind of things you see from the 90s.
Yes. I think that's the thing, isn't it? I think for me, look, if I was to take my Lewis Hamilton goggles off, and let's say I remember even the rumours of Lewis going to Ferrari, I was like, that's never going to happen. So it's not even as if, you know, I've got this, you know, I used to support Schumacher when I was a kid because he was the best one, and that I naturally gravitated to him. But I was too young to understand the politics of Ferrari. I think as an adult, I've seen Ferrari in its various guises and now able to kind of look back on what I saw as like a kid and a teenager. For me, what really I think kind of started setting alarm bells off was the infighting and the different briefings that we're getting from drivers. And I think for the first time we're seeing Leclerc whether it's him, whether it's his agent, whether it's speculative or whatever, but real kind of actual stories about Charles Leclerc potentially looking out the door post 2027. Fred Vasseur maybe trying to bite back and get a bit of control. Stories of the engineers not agreeing with Charles Leclerc's feedback, and obviously then Lewis Hamilton coming in with his dossiers of this isn't right, but then obviously, also he himself kind of saying there's things behind the scenes that aren't working. It really does feel like a team which is kind of, I guess I would say, suffocating under its own kind of hype, suffocating by its own self-raised expectations. I guess is that like an accurate way to kind of to think about it?
Yeah, I think that is a very accurate description, I would say, because no matter where you go in the world, if you see someone wearing a Ferrari cap, you know full well that they're possibly a fan and that they are known as the team which is the most successful in Formula One. So you would expect them to do well. And when you've got all these ingredients, you've got, of course, the money behind it, you've got the test track, you've got the two very good drivers, you've got a lot of good staff there. You would expect them to perform and expect them to win. To be third in the constructors is not where the Tifosi expected to be at the start of the year. And I mean, there's even a real possibility with the way Red Bull and Verstappen are going, they could be fourth.
Yeah, it could be fourth.
Fourth is the equivalent of finishing last with the Tifosi. That's how bad things have got. And the expectations and the internal politics are not helping with the current state at Ferrari.
No, they're really not. So I guess let's get into, I guess, the politics side of things and I guess the technical side of things. So I guess you're probably better at describing this than I am. I have an idea, but what seems clear is that out off the bat, this year's car, which I remember them saying, despite the fact that last year's car was, a car which was capable of fighting for race wins and podiums, and to be fair, towards the end of last season, you could say was between the first and second fastest car at points towards the end of last season, especially after the summer break. They said they were going with a radical new design this season. But what has happened is it feels as if this is a car which, no matter what type of circuit, no matter what conditions, seems to struggle because there's fundamental design flaws. I guess, put it simply, what are like the fundamental design flaws? Is it like the fact that they can't lower the car? Is it the brakes because of the lift and coast? Like, I guess, what are the things that are like holding Ferrari back at the moment?
I think the fact that they can't run it as they want, as the drivers want, in the fact that if they run it too low, you could get disqualified.
Yeah.
The understeer problem is an issue, and that's what Charles was complaining about at Singapore as well. And the fact that drivers feel like passengers is worrying in itself. I think the other the brake issue is predominantly a Singapore issue in my eyes because Singapore's a tough circuit on brakes, and clearly there was something wrong this weekend with Ferrari's brakes in particular. But there is no real track where I would say Ferrari looks strong, high downforce circuits, with the exception of maybe Monaco and Hungary when Leclerc managed to get second at Monaco and pole in Budapest.
Yeah.
Not really amazing. Low downforce circuits, not really amazing. I mean, there doesn't seem to be a track. There isn't really a track which I could point at and say the SF225 works well here.
Yeah.
And when you haven't got that, combined with all the issues of the fact that they can't get it set up the way they'd like, the understeer, the brake issues, it really seems like Ferrari have down tools a little bit already and thought, well, we can't really rectify this car. Let's just go and focus on 2026, which is a lot of teams are doing.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think, it's one of those things where if you looked at, if we took the strongest or the biggest high points from both drivers' weekends and looked how that went, both of them, Lewis, I guess you could say China Saturday, with the sprint race, and then Charles Saturday in Hungary, and you say, look at, you'd think, okay, we're looking at a car and driver finally in sync to be able to beat the rest of the field in their own way. But in both examples, the next day, for one reason or another, they're unable to extract that over the course of a whole race distance. Obviously, like Lewis, I think ended up being disqualified from China in the end for plank wear.
Yes.
And obviously Charles in Hungary, whilst they did lead, I think, or they were in and around, the position to be able to win the race. Once it got to the second round of pit stops, I think they raised tire pressures, I think, to raise the car to ensure that, they didn't end up with plank wear issues, and he fell away, and that was quite a disastrous kind of race for Charles. And I feel like for Ferrari, I guess this is, me and you know Ferrari, we know everything about the history of Ferrari, right? I guess, like you say, is it such a bad thing to throw away this season as early as they've done, or is it still an incredibly poor indictment that, I think in your article you mentioned that this could be like the third winless season of the
20s.
of the 20s, right? So, which is insane to think about. So I think, for how do you balance that with, okay, well, they realized the car was bad and straight away switch. I think there's been one upgrade this year. Or is it really is it a really poor indictment on Fred Vasseur and the technical team at Ferrari that, they deviated from last season, and now, this season's car is demonstrably worse?
I think it's a bad indictment on the technical side, yeah. I think once the Ferrari technical people knew that this is a bit of a clunker, we can't really do much with it because obviously development time and the cost cap, that's when they probably thought, okay, we've got to move on. But to be where they are is astronomical, because there still was an expectation Ferrari could still get second in the Constructors' Championship. And with the fact that the plank issue and the fact they have to raise it up to not get disqualified, that something changes in the balance. It suddenly becomes undrivable, as I mentioned. I think the other problem is that while they have stopped, Mercedes have still managed to keep up a decent enough level. Red Bull, as I mentioned, are coming back and are going to continue developing. So they were damned if they continued developing, and they're damned if they stopped. And I think that's the technical problem. That was the technical team's dilemma, and unfortunately they went with the option of, okay, we've got to stop, and it's just going to get worse before it gets better. And the last 6 races, I think you could probably, even Leclerc said, I don't think we're going to win a race this year. Lewis has said, I don't think we're going to win a race this year. So I think they're kind of in the mode of, well, let's just get the season done and let's move on to 2026.
Yeah, and you don't blame them for that,
No.
do you? In any size, you look at Mercedes in 2021, and they were in the middle of a title fight, and I think they committed to only one big upgrade, which I think happened just before Silverstone, maybe around Silverstone, maybe around there, and that was their only upgrade for the whole season. Obviously, they managed to sort something out with the engine mapping around Brazil, but technically they only had one, and because they were concentrating on 2022 and the big regulation and change. Ferrari, you could say, I have done the same, but I guess, again, looking to Mercedes, it's no guarantee that, sacrificing this season will result in success next season. Obviously, you'd think with, engine regulations, I think everyone seems to think that they'll be behind Mercedes, but still one of the strongest engines, unless the reports of them having a poor engine is true. And that, but is that Toto Wolff just spreading rumors? Who knows? But, I think it's a dangerous game to play with such a passionate fan base, not just the Tifosi, but as someone knee deep in Team LH, some would even say Cult LH, it's a dangerous game to play with two very passionate sets of fans in what is, I guess, we could say like we could be at a sliding doors moment with Ferrari in terms of if these regulations don't start off well, do they keep Charles Leclerc? Does Lewis Hamilton stay around? Where does this team go if they're unable to kind of get a foothold in these regulations, which would make it, how many regulations in a row that they've failed to kind of ace and get on top of?
Well, that's the big thing now. They've got to get the 26 car at a standard where they can fight for wins, because it's not just with the Tifosi. I mean, Leclerc leaving would be catastrophic. He has stepped up to the plate time and time again for Ferrari through good times and bad. If you cut inside him, he bleeds Rosso. He bleeds it, and losing him would be, as I said, it would be cataclysmic, because he could go to McLaren, which 20 years ago when we watched F1 would be the cardinal sin for any Tifosi.
Yeah.
With Lewis, I think it's different. He knows he's got nothing to prove. I think he went to Ferrari for the fact that this was one more challenge.
Yeah.
And I think if he realizes that this car is not going to work and it's going to be like this to at least, I would say 28, 29, he's not getting any younger. You might as well say, well, okay, I'm out. And no one could really blame him, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, not at all. He's got nothing to prove, really, has he? And in that sense, and I guess we've touched on it there. But we'll get back to Leclerc shortly. But I guess we've touched on it briefly. You mentioned in the article, I guess from a technical point of view, we looked at the job that Lauren Mekies is doing at Red Bull in terms of that listening to driver feedback, and potentially, we've heard about how he's kind of taken on board some of Max Verstappen's feedback, and Max has said, or they've said, we didn't. I think maybe it was the Baku, right? And they're like, we didn't really expect that setup direction to work, but Max said that he wanted to try it, and then they tried it, and he was able to kind of maximize his kind of his potential within that car, and they were able to win that race. I guess looking at Fred Vasseur's position now in the Ferrari team's technical position, without, there seems to be restructures all the time in Ferrari. But do you see Fred Vasseur lasting beyond the end of his contract next year? Or do you think that, I guess, is it a case of if it gets to the summer break next year and they're nowhere near, or they're just, or maybe it's similar to what we are this season, do you think, that's maybe the end of Fred?
It's difficult with Fred, because obviously he got a new deal in the summer.
Yeah.
Which you would think, okay, that keeps him around for 2 or 3 years. But as we've discovered recently in Formula One, contracts don't mean
nothing.
They mean nada. They're worth less than toilet paper. So I can see Ferrari being as cutthroat as it is. Deciding, okay, right, we're not going anywhere. This isn't getting any. Our drivers are not happy. We could lose Charles Leclerc. Let's move on and let's look around. But let's be real. The options around aren't exactly great. You've got his name escapes me, from the hypercar program. But that's a different kettle of fish in itself.
Yeah.
And you've also got certain Mr. C. Horner.
Yeah. I mean, look, and we know that Christian's been apparently belling everyone up and down the grid. Basically, it's insane that piece of news has come out via sitting team principals saying Christian Horner's been calling my boss, asking for my job at both Aston Martin and Haas. Do you ever see a situation where that happens? I mean, obviously they flirted with the idea of Adrian Newey, and Adrian wanted, I think too much power in saying, deciding how he wanted his department to look like, and obviously maybe, a lot of working from home potentially rather than kind of living in Maranello. Christian Horner, we know, is looking for. If in an ideal world he would want some kind of ownership program where he owns the team in the same way that Toto Wolff owns like 33% of Mercedes. He's not going to get that at Ferrari, but also I guess the opportunity to be team principal of Ferrari may be too difficult to turn down. Do you see Ferrari or Christian Horner kind of, let's say Fred doesn't improve things, do you see them going for Christian?
I think they're going to have a look, but the question that is the big question with Christian Horner is how much is he going to be seen as damaged goods, considering the end of his stint at Red Bull was not just off track bad, but also on track. The results were plateauing, and also there was a mass staff exodus. And it also depends on what Christian Horner be willing to relocate his family to Italy, learn a new language, get settled there. That's always been the big problem with Ferrari, is getting English staff to move to Italy. It's why John Barnard, when he was recruited from McLaren in the 80s, said, I want a design office in Guildford, because he didn't want to go to England. You can do that as a designer because, your work is very independent. Obviously, you have your deputies as well. But a team principal role, not so easy.
Yeah, I know you're going to be there.
So it really depends on what Christian wants. On top of as we've mentioned, team ownership, there's been rumours that he could go to Alpine, and Alpine are looking for shareholders apparently. So I think Christian needs to weigh up his options on that front.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? Much in the same way that I never really thought Adrian Newey would go to Ferrari, just the logistical reasons before the political reasons. I again, with Christian Horner, it almost feels a bit too Galactico with Ferrari. You've got Charles Leclerc, you've got Lewis Hamilton. It's almost as if, adding like the superstar name brand team principal on top of that, who is also outside of Ferrari. I don't know. For me, maybe it's no different to when, Ross Brawn went over with Michael. But I guess the problem with Christian, like I say, it's not just the on-track stuff. It's the off-track stuff. It's how it ended. They're not taking a championship. Obviously he did win a championship recently, but the form of 24 and back in the last bits of 25 weren't great, and I feel like you said, I do feel like that's a bit too much. There's too much of a gamble from Ferrari, plus the wages that he would ask for. I just feel like that's a bit too much for me. So having said all that, we mentioned him earlier, Charles Leclerc. Is there a chance of Charles Leclerc leaving Ferrari? It feels like the 2027 driver market could be the craziest silly season, or 2026 summer could be the craziest silly season we've ever seen if George gets a 1+1 contract at Mercedes and Red Bull don't perform the way that they would like to perform, the way that Max wants them to perform, given that they're making their own engines. Does Charles Leclerc do we see a situation with Charles Leclerc where he kind of enters into that silly season and potentially, no matter what his heart says, potentially his mind says leave Ferrari?
100%. I think he needs to slowly realise that his window of winning a world championship is getting shorter by the years, and we know Leclerc's got the talent on his day to race with the best. We know he's got the potential. We've seen it time and time again. But if Ferrari don't deliver him a competitive car, loyalty. I mean, what's the point of staying? Loyalty doesn't win you world championships. That's been proven time and time again. So I definitely can see him leaving, and I definitely feel like, with the way Nicholas Todd has spoken in recent days about that we want a good car, we want a winning car, that's kind of like a warning shot to Ferrari themselves. You better get this spot on, or we're going to be on our way. And with Nicholas Todd, I mean, he's been around the business for years, and he knows what goes and what doesn't. And there's a real feeling, for me at least, that if McLaren have their continued issues with Piastri and Norris, that he would go to Papaya. And I think that would probably be his best option. Failing that, you might as well go and try Aston Martin.
Yeah. I think that's it, really, isn't it? There's so many little stories going on within the teams, with the thing is, George Russell could potentially win a world title next year and still find his way either with Max Verstappen as a teammate or out the door at Mercedes. You then look at Aston Martin, Fernando Alonso after next year could potentially retire. I think he's started to make rumblings about that. I know he says if the car's bad, I'll want to stay on again, but it's the first time we've really started to hear him talk about stopping. To go into a works Honda team, essentially, that's going to be with Adrian Newey at the helm. That seat is going to be gold dust for any top driver. And Lawrence Stroll is not going to back down from any kind of financial reparation for anyone that he wants to kind of replace Fernando Alonso. The situation at McLaren, like, how long can that go on for? It's all smiles and whatever, but let's say they're back in it next season and the two of them are fighting over world championships again next season. Lewis and Rosberg lasted 3 seasons?
Mm-hmm.
In essence, in that title fight kind of cauldron. God, how long was Senna and Prost? Was that 3 seasons?
That was even less. That was 2.
There's 2 seasons, right? Yeah, that was 2 seasons before, I think after the first season, Prost was already looking to go, to be honest. So, you have that. And so, so you have Mercedes, McLaren, Ferrari, Aston Martin. God knows what these other teams, who knows, could out of nowhere. We don't know what Audi may do. We don't know what Cadillac. We don't know what, who knows. Williams could end up being a major player in the game. We don't know. The new regulations, engine regulations, make you feel as if we just don't know what the order's going to be, I guess, right?
No, I think this is the one year where if you ask me who can win the World Championship, I'd have to say, well, hand me a bowl, put all the teams into a bowl, and I'll spin them round and I'll pick one, and then we can go from here. I think with the regulations being what they are and the fact that it's not just a chassis regulation, we have a power unit one as well, it's really going to be difficult to assess where we stand going into Melbourne next year. Although, as what has been rumoured, Mercedes seem to be the slightest favourite, but I think the driver market will really start to hit momentum around, I would say, Monaco time, when we've got the first few races under the belts. We already know where the pecking order stands, and then that's with the fact that everyone is back in Europe, all the little rumours can really intense.
I think that's right. I think you're right. It really will. I think, like I say, once everyone's back in Europe and once everyone's, once all those motorhomes, everyone starts to become very comfortable walking in and out of motorhomes, and races aren't far from people's houses or agents' bases and all of those things. And it really will create what I think is, I'm super excited for next season. Before we get into that, it would be negligent of me to not have a podcast about Ferrari and not talk about Lewis Hamilton. It's been a weird one, I guess, with Lewis, right? He's come to a new team. The team itself is, as we've described, a team in crisis. He's definitely, I think by his own words, struggled to adapt to the car, but then there's been improvements recently, and I think we've seen since the summer break especially a big turnaround from where we were before the summer break, which was 2 races where probably his 2 worst race weekends in terms of qualifying especially, and that feel for him under the car. We're in October, it's October the 9th. I guess, how would you kind of summarize Lewis's start at Ferrari?
This is a tough one
Yeah.
because, like, part of me wants to say, yeah, it's been depressing to watch, but
Mm,
there's also been the other side of, okay, there's been a little bit of progress. I
yeah.
think we'd probably describe it as frustrating. I
Yeah.
think there have been moments where you thought the old Hamilton is back,
Yeah.
like in China in the sprint, like in Austria where he performed fairly amicably and finished fourth. But then you look at Spa, you look at Hungary, you just look at days where you think, is it there still? And
Mm,
I think I think we can only really see when he's done is next season, start next season.
yeah.
If it continues to plateau, that's when we can start making a judgment.
I think that's what I've always said is, I think it was I think a lot of people went too early for my liking. And, I think we've seen equitable results against Charles Leclerc, recently. And I think, if that continues on that trajectory, then I think, like you say, next season, new car, no excuses with regards to like the settling in kind of situation. Let's see. And I do genuinely think that I don't think Lewis, for me to be honest, I think the qualifying pace, I think that's been on the decline since 21, I would probably say
Yep.
personally. Um, but I think race pace has been pretty consistent with Lewis. Even when he's been bad, the race pace has been pretty consistent up until this season, where I think at the beginning of the season, there were times where he had to I think even in China, I think he let Leclerc past. And there's been other times where he's had to kind of, especially at the start, had to let Leclerc pass because, just the pace wasn't there. But as he's got used to the car, I think the race pace has got a lot better. And when I look at Lewis's race pace, I think next season, if there's a car which he's comfortable with, I think it's gonna be really interesting looking at that head to head between him and Charles. If it's anything like it's been since post summer break, I think we'll be in for a very interesting inter-team battle. And I guess both drivers need that inter-team battle to go their way for separate reasons. I guess Lewis to kind of justify to everyone else outside of Team LH, like, does he justify a top seat in the game? And, does he still have it? With Charles, it's like, if you're not beating Lewis Hamilton, your stock kind of diminishes. I guess a fair amount. And, when we talk about
Mm.
those potential talks to go to McLaren, to go to potentially, I don't know, no, maybe Red Bull, maybe Aston Martin, whatever, right? Whatever seats are available,
Mm.
you have a lot less bargaining power if in the first 5, 6, 7, 8 races of the season you're not, I guess, comfortably beating Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah, I would say so. I think Charles needs to keep up his form at the moment into next year, because if Lewis suddenly comes on strong, people are going to start to think, well, hang on a minute, is Charles struggling a little bit? So
Yeah,
for both of them, the start of the year will be very crucial. And in particular, with the driver market being so congested,
yeah,
there is really no room to hide. If you have one bad weekend, it could be the difference between you getting a top drive to, I don't know, maybe a midfield seat.
yeah.
So it's going to be difficult.
It's going to be very difficult. I guess you look at the example of Carlos Sainz, right? Like, top driver in a top team, but not quite the top driver in the top dream team. What are your options? And no, obviously, look, going to Williams could turn out to be a great move for him, but Williams is not Ferrari, and I guess it could be the difference for Charles between, like you say, the best team. If Oscar and Lando, and it looks like it'll probably be Oscar who ends up kind of doing a Daniel Ricciardo and being like, this isn't my team. This is clearly this other person's team. I want to go and make my own team somewhere. If a position comes up at McLaren, they have youth drivers, although they've just let Dunn go. But, is the difference between getting that kind of seat and maybe, again, we'll see where Aston Martin are, but maybe the Aston Martin seat, maybe another seat in the midfield. So let's talk about McLaren quickly.
Mm.
Um, I don't know. It's such a funny title race. In any other season, Ed, me and you have been watching this sport for how fucking long now, right? Any other season, two drivers who have never won a title in the same team, prestigious team, by the way, one of the most prestigious teams on the grid, going for a title. There's less than a race win between the both of them. Why isn't this grabbing the attention of like the wider world the same way that 2021 did, the same way that Mercedes did, the same way that Senna did?
I think the main reason why the Piastri Norris rivalry hasn't caught light, and this is going to sound incredibly harsh on both of them, is that there's no elements of drama. In every good title fight, you need that element of drama, and both have been fairly consistent. They finished first and second. Norris has had his, days where he's not been strong, and they are well known. Piastri too has recently slipped up, but it's been a fairly good-natured title fight as well. There's no real animosity until this weekend, of course. In which case, that the friendly, the once what I once described as the friendly rivalry has probably been thrown into the kitty litter. I think that's in every title fight you need some sort of intrigue and off-track drama as well. I mean, with 2021, it was helped by the fact that Wolff and Horner were inches away from punching hell out of each other in the paddock. Here it's not so. It's a bit more chill and a bit more relaxed, and I don't know if that's really appealed. I don't know if that's appealing to viewers or not.
It's look. I think Tandy mentioned something before, but at the end of the day, the personalities are, these two aren't as big as Lando Norris is. He's not like a household name in the way that, respectively, I guess Lewis and Max were in 2021. Plus, Oscar's, this is third season, right? And again, his personality outside of the car is very and good. It's very laid back. It's very, very cool. So I guess, outside of the sport, there's nothing really for people who don't watch F1. Like I say, there's no drama that's populating the back pages. When Lando crashed into Oscar in Canada, he took himself out and then he apologized for it immediately afterwards. So, that part of it was managed very well. They kind of, this incident, really and truly, Ed, let's be honest now. We've seen some shit in a title fight. That little love tap that Lando Norris gave to Oscar was nothing. Really and truly was nothing. But it's a thing because of how closely McLaren have tried to manage this title race.
I think in Prost and Senna's era, that would be considered practice material. They'd be doing that in FP1. But the thing is, the difference with this one is the fact that it got Piastri riled up, and the fact that he was saying, "This is not fair." That's a S. You can add the rest way of defending, and then you've got Lando in the press conference saying, "If anyone disagrees with that kind of stuff, they shouldn't be in F1." That's the first time I think we've seen them both properly have words with each other, because every time there's been like a moment where they've had their races changed by one another, they've been fairly amicable. Example at Monza, Piastri was not happy that initially that they'd made the swap. By the end of it, he was like, "I agree, I would have done the same thing," and blah blah blah. This time, it doesn't really feel that way. It feels more like a case of, right, okay, we've won the constructors for you now. Let's go and focus on our own shtick.
It almost feels like a little too late. Like how many races were left? Six,
yeah.
6 races. It feels as if this had happened like 4 races ago. If this had happened like Zandvoort, then, and there was no mechanical failure for Norris. It feels as if it's something like as big as this weekend had happened. Then we would have been set up for like an incredible run-in of races. I feel as if, whilst there has that kind of breaking of everything has happened now, I just feel as if maybe, you know what, maybe it isn't too little too late, because Lando is less than a race win away now, and you've got Max Verstappen. I guess I'll ask you, do you think, is there a chance of Max Verstappen winning this title?
Of course.
Yeah.
I genuinely believe he can do it. I think every time these two take each other off, or they cost each other points, Verstappen inches just a little bit quicker, a little bit closer, I should say, to both of them. And with the fact that Red Bull are continuously developing the car while McLaren have already stopped, I have a feeling that Red Bull are going to throw the kitchen sink at it, and they're going to try and get Max the title. And I can see it happening. I generally feel that he has the form at the moment to really go for it. And to be honest with you, he's got nothing to lose. If he doesn't win the championship, it's not going to change his landscape, his landscape on life. But I feel like he can, once he can sense blood in the water, he really goes for it.
Yeah. And look, same thing they did in 2021. They continue to develop the whole season, and it stood them in good ground for both 21 and beyond. So, there's no better tonic to any issue than winning. And, why not just, keep winning as long as you can, or keeping good as long as you can. So I guess I'll say, having said all that, we'll as my good friend Cameron says, we'll round third base, and we'll get into to the end of the podcast. If I had to put a gun to your head, fucking Lando, Oscar, or Max, I guess. Who are you having?
Well, I might be accused of being on delusional juice. I would say I'm going to put my neck on the line, and I think Verstappen will take it, but just by the Finisterre margins.
I mean, look, it's going to have to be to get back from... How many points is it?
63.
63. 6 races to go. I mean, it's not impossible, is it? Jesus Christ. It's nowhere near impossible. I mean, the thing is, it sounds like a lot, but like the gap between first and second is 7 points. So that's 45. That's 35. In itself, and then you're looking at maybe one DQ, not DQ, one DNF, thank you, one DNF, or just one bad race, one bad wet race, where things just don't go right. Another incident where Oscar skittles across the grass in the same way that he did in Australia. Another qualifying where Lando qualifies in 9th, 10th. These aren't things which we haven't seen before, which could happen again. And if it does, look, as someone who's been a virulent Verstappen hater, I think I've said it before in this podcast this season, the level of respect has gone up immeasurably for Verstappen over the last season and a half. And if he was able to pull out the bag this season, I'm just going to be one of the greatest championship wins of all time, really and truly. I'm struggling in my head to think of a better championship win. For me, I'm looking at, I feel like if Vettel put up a better fight, 2018 was like a really good season for Lewis. And then I don't know. I feel like I can't imagine. I guess Raikkonen. I guess you're looking at Raikkonen.
Yeah, maybe.
I'm thinking of a McLaren team with 2 drivers who should win the title, and then someone kind of coming in and stealing the title. I guess that's the one where you're looking at, like, is that the one?
Probably Prost 86 would be comparable, when Alain looked the outsider from the Williams Honda pair of Piquet and Mansell and won it at the death in Adelaide. You also have to think there's 3 sprints as well. 24 more points on the table as well.
Wow, I forgot about that. Jesus Christ. There you go. So God, and is a sprint next? Is Austin a sprint? No, I don't think it is it? Is
hang
it
on,
Brazil?
Brazil definitely. Let me just have a quick.
Have a ganders for me, please, Ed, if you could.
Yeah. Because Brazil, we've got one. I think we have one in Qatar.
Qatar, yeah, Qatar.
Qatar, we have one as well. In Austin, we do have a sprint in Austin.
We do.
Yes.
I thought we did. Yeah, right. So we're into look, to be fair, we've got some circuits coming up. I mean, I say we've got some circuits in Austin and Brazil. We've got the antidote to, I think, some of the more stale circuits that we've had recently, street circuits. We've got 2 real racing circuits coming up, and for them to have sprint races as well, increased jeopardy. So I think, it's going to be very exciting to see. Thank you so much for coming on. I always like a pleasure to have F1 chats with you, my friend. Before you go, I've got to ask you, what's your favourite Oasis song?
Oh God.
Is that like a favourite kid situation? Like, how do you really
God, I'm trying to think. Live Forever, I would say.
Live Forever. Okay,
yes.
Nice.
Live Forever, followed by Don't Look Back in Anger.
There you go, classics all over the board, and mine is Rock and Roll Star. If anyone wanted to know, that's my karaoke thing, bro. That and Westlife. But look, that's a story for another day. Thank you so much, guys, for watching. If you've been watching, much appreciated. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Let us know what you think about the title race, about Ferrari, all of them things there. And remember, no matter what life throws at you, keep it on the black stuff. Thank you, Ed. Thank you all. Take care.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.